no Quake mates. Okay, so easy.
Hello, I'm Bluheim, and I'm going to talk about the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake, the second part of Chapter 18. It's going to be two parts. The first one, I will just give my opinion about the ending and why I find it a brilliant idea. The second part, I will explain my theories and I will comment some details that I found interesting. We reached the end of the highway. Until here the remake is perfect. I think at this point nobody can complain about how this game has been made in terms of characters, combat, story, etc. This is loyal to the original with small modifications that, in my opinion, are necessary. What happens after is something I thought it was awful, but once I reflected about it, I ended up thinking this is the best move Square could have made. Sephiroth appears and he invites us to go with him to this world, dimension, timeline. During the whole episode, the characters have visions of the future, like Red 13 running, being the scene post-credits in the original, 500 years later. Red 13 says, a glimpse of tomorrow if we fail here today. So, if they fail, then the original story will repeat. Aerith knows what is going to happen, that she is going to die at Sephiroth's hands. Conclusion, she knows the entire original story. Now comes what I think it is a brilliant idea from Square. They define the enemies as an entity from a future timeline that has manifested in the present day. It fights barehanded to protect the future that gave shape to it. The Whispers and this entity represent the original timeline. This is Square saying that this is the remake. It is not the original, and as a remake they want to be able to modify the story to improve it, like saving Wedge or Biggs. For me, the Whispers represent the public that demand the remake to be exactly as the original. It is like telling to the characters in the remake, hey, you have already done all of this. The story is already written because it is a remake. All your actions are determined because you have done them. It is already known how it's going to end. Do you want to be slaves of your destiny, or do you want to fight against that and be free to make your own choices? The fourth wall breaks when the characters in the game want to break off the obligation of fulfill the story we want them to do. They are telling us that they don't want to be used to do the same story, that they want to be free. For me it is mind-blowing, and more the stuff that comes next. Once we enter in the singularity, we have to fight that Whisper Harbinger, whose definition is a creation of whispers, the ones called Arbiters of Fate. These creatures appear when someone tries to alter the course of destiny. They are connected with all the threads of space and time that conform the destiny of the planet. So we, the players, are the Whispers. Cloud and the rest in the remake are free. That is why they do things that they don't do in the original. And that is why the Whispers, us, appear to obligate Cloud to fulfill his destiny. At the end it's Square telling you that if you want exactly the original game, then play the original game and that's it. The remake is a new experience that we saw through the entire game. And honestly, I find it perfect. Why? Because in this episode they respected the original game. They even improved it in certain plots of the story. For me, they have free way to realize the modifications they find appropriate. After we defeat the Whisper Harbinger, Sephiroth appears. Here they offer us another brilliant idea. Square knows what we want and they offer us that, directly. They present us some platform descent, as we have in the original, going for Genova in the crater, and after that we have a fight exactly the same way as we have in the original endgame, when Cloud fights Sephiroth, both alone. The fight happens briefly, it disappears and the final scene happens, with Zack carrying Cloud to meet her, and Biggs alive, changing the course of the original story. The last phrase we see is, the unknown journey will continue. Unknown journey. What does that mean? Well, I take it as Cloud has defeated Destiny. He dissociated from the timeline of the original story. From here he will forge his own destiny. The conclusion I have about all of this is the next one. I know what happens in the original game. I finished it dozens of times. For me, a remake is a reinvention of the game, with an updated graphics engine, with much more details than the original. with a new gaming experience, with a much higher level of exploration than the original, and of course with an improved plot. The plot is not palpable. I mean, you don't need graphics or controller images or text. I can explain you the argument of Final Fantasy VII and you would know it, regardless of the time. What I want to say is that I've been knowing the original story for 20 years, and Square wanting to modify what happens in future episodes to try to improve the plot is in my opinion perfect. What I want from a remake is what I said, to experience what I experienced with the original but with an updated game experience. The fact that they showed us the end of the original game with the meteor, with the descent, with the Sephiroth fight, all of this I take it as Square telling us, look, do you want to experience all of this with updated gameplay? Okay, here you have it. Now that you are satisfied, let us do the remake we want to do, with a more interesting story. And I find it smart, and yes, I find it hopeful. Because on the one hand, I don't know what is going to happen in the next episodes, and that generates me a feeling as the one I had when I was a kid waiting for another Final Fantasy release. And on the other hand, they fully convinced me with this remake. They showed that they know how to do it correctly. They respected all the details of the original, and the changes they did have been to improve what already existed. Whether they save Aerith or not, whether Zack is alive or not, whether they modify anything or not, I am fully convinced that the execution will be satisfactory, just as they have done with this game. Nothing more to say. First of all, I want to say that I haven't read any opinion, theory or review of the game. I give you my word. In fact, at this moment I only finished the game once, so these theories might make sense or they might just be paranoia that has nothing to do with reality. With this being said, I will resume the story of Sephiroth so you understand more all the context, and I will explain why I consider this Final Fantasy VII Remake as a sequel of the original, placed after the events of Advent Children, which is canon. As we can see before fighting Red Dragon in the original game, Sephiroth tells us that he wants to join the planet. He knows the planet protects itself when it needs it, so he wants to use the black materia to summon Meteor, to force the planet to use all of its power to protect itself. Once the planet uses all that lifestream, Sephiroth wants to absorb it all, becoming, as he says, a new god. A god that, as his mother Jenova, will travel the entire universe, using the planet as a ship. In Advent Children, he explains it better. At the end of the game, Cloud kills Sephiroth. The holy materia, summoned by Aerith in her last breath before dying, is not powerful enough to save the planet from the meteor. The planet uses the lifestream to protect itself. It is understood that Aerith helps here, to clean Midgar and to heal itself. Sephiroth's plan worked, but since Cloud kills him, he can't take advantage of it. Sephiroth wanted to be the one-winged angel in the middle of that destruction, but Cloud thwarted his plans. It's important to mention that the one-winged angel from the original has nothing to do with the one-winged angel from Advent Children. In Advent Children he adopts his ultimate form totally human with a black wing. A curious detail is that the song from the first fight against Sephiroth, Bizarro Sephiroth, is called The Birth of a God. Two years later, in the events of Advent Children, Sephiroth and Jenova reincarnate. In other words, they manifest again due to the evil and the willpower they possess. Jenova is located in the lifestream, contaminating people with a disease called geostigma. Vincent calls it the genes of Sephiroth. Sephiroth's spirit appears in three characters, Kadai, Oz, and Yasu. A new reunion occurs, and due to the combination of all parts of Jenova with the spirit of Sephiroth, a new Sephiroth is born in his new improved version. A more powerful version than the original, that feels human than in his one-winged angel version, but with a black wing. This is a very important detail. Aside from his main theme, the associated theme he has in both the movie and the remake is called Promised Land theme. Listen to it and remember it because it is very important. Cloud defeats him again, but Sephiroth disappears saying that he will never be a memory, a timeless Sephiroth. Now I will explain how I interpret the events of the remake. In Advent Children, when Cloud kills Kadai, a new version of Sephiroth appears, an immortal version. That is why when he's defeated in the movie, he just smiles and says that he won't be a memory. If we pay attention, we see that the Promised Land theme appears in Kadai's funeral.
Kadash? Huh?
As Rufus says in Advent Children, lifestream courses through our world, always flowing between life and death. If that cycle is the true nature of life, then history will inevitably keep repeating itself. That is, lifestream is timeless, and the cycle of life includes the past. Sephiroth knows it, and after the Advent Children events, he found a way to manifest himself in other timelines. From here, Sephiroth tries to create a timeline where he doesn't die. He knows he failed. That is why he's trying to change the past. This Sephiroth manifests in the Final Fantasy VII Remake timeline, altering since the beginning the events that have to happen. In the intro of the game we can already see how Sephiroth is affecting this timeline. Look. The fact of Sephiroth's team appearing that early tells us that something wrong is happening. It tells us that the original story is going to be affected by this Sephiroth from the future. In Reactor 1, before setting the bomb, a black feather appears in front of Cloud. The only Sephiroth that has a black wing is the one from Advent Children. In Chapter 2, just after leaving Reactor 1, we already meet Sephiroth. And just after that, we can hear this. Pay attention.
You got this.
The use of this Sephiroth's theme from Advent Children is not a coincidence. It explicitly tells us that this Sephiroth is the one after Advent Children. When they meet, Sephiroth shows concern for the planet, and tells Cloud that if the planet dies, the bond between them will disappear, and he doesn't want that. He also asks a favor. He wants Cloud to escape and leave. As I said before, Sephiroth is trying to modify the events to find a favorable result, that is, to not die. I'm not sure why he wants Cloud to live, but for some reason he has realized that killing Cloud doesn't save him from his destiny. In fact, taking into account the events from Advent Children and its reunion, he realized that he needs Cloud to achieve his goal, probably for his physical resurrection. We can see this at the end of the game, when it is clearly seen how Sephiroth is holding back and has no intention to kill Cloud. Although we can figure out, we can't be sure about the reason why Sephiroth needs Cloud. But I have a theory. Sephiroth's goal after Advent Children is to become a god and travel the universe to dominate it. The process to become a god starts precisely when Cloud threw a Sephiroth to the livestream. before the events in Final Fantasy VII. My theory is that any result where Cloud dies is a failed result for Sephiroth, because none of that would have happened and he wouldn't be where he is now. Considering that in the livestream is where all the past and future information resides, it is the only reason I find for Sephiroth to worry about the state of the planet. A moment that helps this theory is when Sephiroth says, "Should this world be unmade, so too shall her children." Who knows? During the events in Final Fantasy VII Remake, we can see differences compared to the original, in addition with the Whispers' appearance. These Whispers are the Guardians of the Destiny, and their appearance is a direct consequence of Sephiroth willing to alter this timeline. Also during the game, Cloud has visions from the future, consequence of the future Sephiroth and having Genova's cells. This scene proves it. At the beginning of Chapter 9, when Aerith waits him, Cloud has a vision and a familiar song begins to play. A tear runs down Cloud's face. Now I will show you the last scene in Final Fantasy VII. Yes, Cloud in that moment is seeing the end of the original story, the last image of Aerith, already dead. Not only that, the most interesting thing of all of this is that not only he had a premonition, but he also cried about it. And that here is very important, because it tells us that it is a memory. Cloud carries the sadness of Aerith's death in his subconscious. In other words, Cloud is remembering what happened in FF7. Peter Sephiroth is altering this timeline and is affecting this Cloud from the remake, and his memories, both past and future, overlap. That is why we can take all what happens as a sequel, because it happens after the events from Advent Children. At the end, Sephiroth appears after Motorball in the highway, before leaving Midgar. The Whispers that want to preserve Destiny start mobilizing because Sephiroth shouldn't be there. Here Aerith tells us that if we enter in this singularity, what we find will be a terrible freedom. Now I want to talk about Aerith for a moment. Although she doesn't tell us explicitly, it is assumed that in this Final Fantasy VII Remake, Aerith knows everything about Sephiroth wanting to affect the timeline. In fact, Aerith knows all the events from the original story. It's pretty clear at the end, when before going into the singularity, Aerith refers to what Sephiroth told us about the planet in Chapter 2, saying that while he seems to care about the planet, he's actually a terrible threat, and all of this shouldn't be happening. Then she asked the group to help her, implying that she saw these events coming, asking us to stop Sephiroth. Her words are, "We have to stop it, but if we do, we will change more than just fate. If we succeed, we win, we will change ourselves." I suppose that is why I hesitated. I think it is pretty clear. Also, I want to mention that when people touch Aerith, they receive information about her contact with the planet. Cloud or Marlene are some examples. At first I thought this Aerith was from the future, like Sephiroth, but the truth is that it doesn't make much sense. She is the only one able to communicate with the planet, and seeing that the planet wants to preserve the original timeline, she probably knows what is happening, the alterations that Sephiroth is making and what is going to happen. Elmira explains it to us when she says that Aerith has always had visions. If we mix that with the future Sephiroth, it is not unreasonable to think that the voices in this timeline are showing her the future. The group decides to fight against Sephiroth, and in order to do this, they must fight Destiny. As she says, Aerith was hesitant about fighting Fate. At the end, realizing how dangerous this timeless Sephiroth is, she decides that she must stop him. As a consequence, they must fight and defeat Destiny, because all of this doesn't happen in the original story. Once they enter the singularity, the characters start to have visions from the future. At the end, once the destiny is defeated, even though it's symbolic because whispers are still appearing, they fight against Sephiroth, and he teleports Cloud to the age of creation. First, Cloud tries to have a new vision from the future, probably how he kills Sephiroth, due to the scenario. But in the age of creation, time doesn't exist. That is why Sephiroth tells him, "Careful now, that which lies ahead does not yet exist." Cloud can't have a memory from the future because in this space the future doesn't exist. There, he asks Cloud to give him his strength and fight Destiny together. Cloud refuses, and after a short fight, where we can see how Sephiroth doesn't want to kill Cloud, Sephiroth tells him the next. 7 seconds till the end. Time enough for you, perhaps. But what will you do with it? Let's see. We don't know what he refers with those words, but my theory is that, considering Cloud's visions through the game, the visions of the Forgotten Capital, and the plot about fighting Destiny, probably it refers to Aerith's death. Cloud having 7 seconds to save her, which probably it will end up happening since the destiny of the original story has been destroyed. The interesting part is that Sephiroth seems to want Cloud to change the story and save Aerith. That is why he warns him. A detail that helps this theory is that when Sephiroth speaks, the City of the Ancients theme plays, the place where Aerith dies. Here you have the comparison.
Yet exist. Our world will become a part of it one day, but I will not end. Nor will I have you end.
This is...
Or not, maybe Square wants us to believe that Aerith is going to be saved and when the moment arrives she will die. It is brilliant because whether she survives or dies, it is going to be a surprise. After this, the end of the game shows us Zack carrying Cloud to meet her, and Big's alive. The timeline changed, and from here we don't know what consequences will have. Honestly, I'm not sure about Zack being alive. Perhaps his outcome has changed, or perhaps they were both unconscious and Oyo took Zack away. There are a lot of possibilities that can fit. As you can see, nothing is certain, and that is why I love this. New players should love this because they can enjoy a new story. Old players should enjoy this because they are able to enjoy a remake with that uncertainty that amazes us, because we feel like we are playing it for the first time. What I love about this is that this game is a sequel but acts as a pure remake because it has everything the original has. That is why I find it brilliant. And I know that regardless of what they do in episode 2, I'm sure they are going to do it right, and that is what matters. In conclusion, I want to say that I haven't investigated all of the details, I only finished the game once. I watched some scenes a few times and I wanted to do this video because I was motivated with all of this. Miss Baker, a speedrunner that knows a lot of Final Fantasy VII, helped me a lot with this. He has been giving me ideas too. So thanks a lot for watching this video and I hope you enjoyed it. See you later.